My name's Miss Taylor, and today we're going to talk about annotating. Annotating seems like a really complicated and confusing concept, but it's not at all. I am currently going into my 5th year teaching, and I feel like every single year, all of my students, when I tell them, all right, let's sit down and annotate, get so overwhelmed, and they feel very kind of stressed out about the concept of annotating. But what I really want to talk about today, and I want to show you today, is that annotating is not complicated at all. And when you do it, it can make reading fiction so much more interesting and also so much more enriching. I think one of the biggest things that I think about annotating is how many times have you read a poem, read a book, or read a chapter or any type of fiction and then forgotten about it immediately after? Like, once you finish that book, once you put that book down, there's no more information in your brain about that book. Annotating is what helps to stop that. So, what is annotation? Annotating with a text means that you are interacting with a text. And by interacting, I almost mean like you're talking to it. You're talking to the author, talking to the characters, talking to the scene, talking to kind of whatever is happening in it. And what it helps you do is not only it helps you close read, so you're getting a lot more information out of that text because you are looking at each and every word, each and every sentence, and you're kind of absorbing it a lot more. But it also allows you to make sense of it yourself and to ask questions yourself. So what we're looking at today is how to annotate, specifically an excerpt from Frankenstein, which is one of my favorite books. I'm looking at the 1818 text version by Mary Shelley. So she has a couple different versions of it. So if you're following along, I'm looking at chapter 4 where the monster is created. So before we dive in, I want to talk about what does good annotating look like. And I think what's most important about it is that you understand it can look like anything. Good annotating is simply just interacting with that text. So in my Frankenstein book, for example, I do a ton of annotating, right? And that annotating can look different in so many different ways, depending on kind of what I'm looking at. So for example, if I'm opening up my book, right, and I'm looking at all of my different writing that I'm having going on in here, this, for example, says, why is he so hateful? ? Right? I'm just asking a general question. I think that sometimes people think that annotating has to be some incredibly amazing commentary on literary analysis of some kind. But what annotating can absolutely be is just asking yourself a question in the margin. Maybe you don't know the definition of a word, so you go look that word up and then annotate on the page. You also can think about text connections to other things. So like, for example, when I was reading Mary Shelley and I'm looking at different ideas in here, I'm maybe thinking about the connection to the soul, and I'm thinking about the connection to Dante's Inferno, a different text that's not related to Frankenstein, but maybe for me, I'm creating that connection in my head, which allows me to further interact with the text and then remember that the monster ultimately doesn't have a soul, and what does that soul mean for the theme of the book and the themes around having souls and the importance of that as human beings. So again, it's for you. It's what does your background knowledge bring to the table when you're thinking about annotating. So it's not about what's the best possible thing that I can create out of this. It's more so, how can I make this text work for me? How can I make myself better understand it through the practice of annotating? So what we're going to be looking at is the specific excerpt of chapter 4 from Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So on my screen is going to be a projection as I annotate through it as well. So let's read the first paragraph together. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 a.m. The rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. So as I'm approaching something like this as a reader, but also kind of a little bit as a writer, I'm thinking about what are things that are sticking out to me first. And that's what I'm going to be focusing my annotations on, is what's popping out to me. The biggest thing that's coming out to me right now is this light idea. So we're looking at this infusing a spark, a half extinguished light, this dull yellow eye, the candle was nearly burnt out. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of symbolism around light. So I'm going to annotate light, fire as well. So when I'm thinking about light and fire, I'm thinking about the idea of the symbolism that goes into that. So what symbolism can I see through light and fire? I would put my symbol, I can't fit that all on there together. I would fit my symbol into that. So what is my symbol here? Maybe something along the lines of life being brought in, because fire often is some sort of representative of light in some way, because humans are bringing fire, and because we need fire to survive, the idea of light and fire is usually associated with life in some way. So what I think is interesting is the concept of the dreary night, and it says that rain is pattering dismally against the panes, right? And so this is also making me think, if it's a dreary night, we have rain. And I think that this is very negative. So that would be part of my annotation here, is the idea that it's negative. Same thing here, the anxiety that amounted to agony. Agony, I'm thinking about pain, both physical and mental. He says, I collected the instruments of life around me. That seems really interesting to me, because when we're thinking about the creation of life, we're thinking about natural, right? The creation of life in and of itself is a natural thing. And so by saying the instruments of life around me, I think that that's really highlighting this idea of the mad scientist. And so this instruments concept makes me think of the unnaturalness of what's happening. And part of what's important about that is that a big theme throughout the novel is this kind of fear of technology, because Mary Shelley wrote this as a Gothic novel, and it was really in big response to the Industrial Revolution and how scared people were about the fact that technology was advancing so quickly, which I also think is super cool when we're thinking about the connection to AI now and the way that we are looking at different types of concerns around technology, how quickly it's working. The exact same thing was happening when this book was written in 1818, post-industrial and kind of during the Industrial Revolution. People were terrified of technology. And so this, as a theme in this, the idea that it was so unnatural, it's not normal, that he can create life out of nothingness. And so the unnaturalness is something that I'm thinking about as I'm working through that. So then he says, well, let's actually go back to, I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. That's really interesting as well. And if I'm looking at what to annotate here, kind of like, what is a toil? If I'm thinking about what is a toil, I know personally that he's kind of thinking about his concepts around his pain that he experienced and the struggle that he went through. But part of your annotation could be literally looking up the definition of toil and then writing that in here as part of that. Another part that I want to look at is back to the rain pattering dismally against the panes. So when I'm looking at rain and the concept of rain in general, a lot of times rain can be some sort of symbol of rebirth. So I would annotate that as well in here, because the birth of the monster is happening. Continuing through, the candle was nearly burnt out, but he says it's his candle. I think that's really important, because I think that my candle is representative of his life, in the same way that I was talking about fire and light being that. So I would put a little arrow down here and I would say his own life, because he's exhausted. We find out that Victor Frankenstein spent 2 years trying to create this creature, trying to create this monster. And so because of that, when he's saying his candle is nearly burnt out, maybe the physical candle is burnt out in the room that he's using to look at his monster, but also the mental anguish and the mental candle of his own life is being burnt out because he's just so exhausted. So again, what am I getting out of annotating through that is that I'm writing all of my own ideas in here. So continuing through, the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, which I said I think is very similar to this concept of his own life as well. And then finally, the creature opens his eye. And so when I'm looking at this yellow eye, yellow very often in literature symbolizes sickness. I know that that seems abnormal because I think us as a society now, we associate yellow with the sunshine, with warmth, with flowers and positivity around that. But back in the day, they actually associated yellow with sickness because of diseases like jaundice, where the yellowing of the eyes happens, or other types of diseases that come along with seasickness, and people would physically turn yellow, like white skin would physically turn yellow. So a lot of our ideals around concept of symbols come from during that time period. So yellow symbolizes sickness. And so because his yellow eye is opening here, I see that yellow is now symbolizing sickness, and I can create that association now that immediately the creature is not going to be accepted because he is sick almost. Then it says it breathed hard. The it here I think is really important because Victor has been thinking of this creature as his kind of like baby this entire time, but then finally it opens its eyes and he doesn't refer to it as he immediately refers to it as it. And so this it here I think is the depersonalization. The depersonalization of the monster. And then it says a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. Again, that depersonalization. But I think what's also important is the convulsive motion agitated, right? It's not that it moved its limbs, it's the convulsive motion agitated its limbs, which I think is showing kind of his lack of control. So as I'm looking at this whole passage, I'm looking at this one paragraph. Look at everything that we got out of it, right? So much came from just a couple of different things that I am annotating as I am working through. And again, that annotation doesn't have to be complicated. That annotation doesn't have to be something that's stressing you out in any way. So as I am looking at what to do with my annotations, I want you to think about what you can do with the rest of this passage. Now that we've looked at just this first paragraph, what I want you to do on your own is look at the rest of the passage and annotate based on these different ideas that I've brought for you. So I want you to think about symbolism. I want you to think about color, the imagery, and the diction that's going along through it. If you're not understanding diction entirely, diction is basically just word choice. It's a fancy way of saying what words did the author choose when they were writing. And so as you are working through your annotations, just remember that it doesn't have to be complicated. It can truly just be you interacting with the text in order to understand more about it. That also can be a process of looking things up, talking to other people, making a connection with something else that you've read previously. And it can also just be simply asking yourself a question. So as you're annotating and working through things, remember that it helps you so much in your remembering of a text and also your analyzation overall. It helps you break things down into smaller chunks, and it helps you better understand just exactly what you're looking for as you are trying to maybe answer a question in your class or understand more about the themes in the piece itself. Thank you so much for watching today. I want you to check out the link in the description that has the rest of this passage that you can check out and annotate on your own. Or you can check out ModSchool for our free resource library where I have an entire interactive lesson that goes along with this. And if you liked this video, you can also check out ModSchool for full 4-week-long courses that talk all about learning in the online world offline and how we can get outside with our homeschooled students and even students that are in school now and looking for something really exciting to think about. Thank you so much and enjoy your annotating.